Okay, this is my recording. So my plan is like this. I want to show you something interesting that I figured out last year, but a little more today. And show you how to figure out certain codes. So everyone knows the Rambam about the shofar and Shiva is remez of the shofar, but I don't think anyone actually knows it. I've not even found anyone. I looked a little and like the nobody says my pshat, which means that nobody knows the true pshat until today. And it's true. I could show you proofs like text where it's mamish clear, almost clear that that's what he's saying. But I don't know how much I'll be able to like prove it to you, but I could like give you the story and also with his like philosophy and how he thinks about everything. I could show it. So did we do? No, we didn't do hilchos Shiva last week, right? At all.
Didn't do hilchos Shiva.
So my akdama for the Rambam in general in Mishnah Torah and my Nevuchim is explicitly philosophical, so it's easy. But in Mishnah Torah, you always have to remember his problem, like what he's doing, what his context is, because people read it like everything. You read it literally, and you start being medayek, and if you don't know like what his problem is that he's solving or anything, then you just don't know what's going on. Now, one of his big problems, especially in Sefer Hamada, and I quoted once the Rambam, he says this himself. I didn't make this up. There's a Geras Tchias HaMaisim. He more or less says this. He has this problem that he thinks that it's important for people, and we have to talk about that and explain that or prove that, if that's a high bar, but at least try to explain what it's about. He thinks that it's important for people to know the truth. And the content of that truth for him is, in broad terms, the Aristotelian philosophy. But that's just a word that doesn't help too much. And he has a problem that there's all these Jews, they're very nice, good Jews, they're interested in the halacha, they follow the Torah, they follow the Talmud, but at least in the way that the Talmud is given to them, that's his basic framing, it doesn't say that in it. It doesn't have it.
Doesn't say what?
Philosophy. What people, another word of saying is what humans are really for, what humans are really about. Yeah, you could come here, wherever. If we'll get more people, I'll change the... I could come there if you want, and maybe that's better.
That's good.
He thinks that if you follow, if you read, for example, the Chovos HaLevavos Akdama, he says this explicitly, but he has a different shitta slightly, but in the Rishonim, there's very clearly this idea. You can, and yeah, I don't know, these kind of quotes, they're explicit. Not even radicalizing anything more than that. You could follow all the halachas and do everything okay and just waste your life. In every sense of it. And he's very sad about this, or sad is not a nice word, but he doesn't like this situation and he's going to fix it. Now he's going to fix it in an extremely sophisticated way because he's not going to present to people. In the guide he presents a conflict, but he's not going to present a conflict to normal people. He knows that the moment you say there's a conflict, then they're out. Or like, forget about it. I'm on the Torah side and I don't care that there's no point to life. But so he doesn't present it as a conflict. He presents it as, and he really believes this, but that's another whole thing. But he presents it as just the pshat of the Torah. He's so radical, like famously, he even has the guts to say that whoever doesn't have this pshat is not pekayres. Like, it's nuts. The level of chutzpah that the Rambam had and what he did, he was like, you got to believe in God the way I believe, which I more or less learned from, these goyim or whatever. But it's true. He doesn't care what their name is. And if you don't believe that, then you're not a Yid. That's what it says in hilchos Shiva, and also later, when it talks about if you believe that God has a body and so on. That was like the most chutzpah thing that anyone could think of doing. Okay, but that's when he's radical. But in the more simple sense, what he's working with is something like this. There's a frame, he has this framing of mitzvahs, of Taryag mitzvahs, which we discussed a little more in 2 or 3 shiurim ago. And that's his framing for the whole Torah. All didn't believe in Taryag mitzvahs, and that's what we have to do. And therefore, what he decided to do was, he chose certain mitzvahs, which are more or less the mitzvahs that included in Sefer Hamada. He organized the mitzvahs by some kind of rational structure of what subject they're about and so on. And he said these group of mitzvahs that are about knowledge. That's called Sefer Hamada, the book of knowledge, the book of wisdom, but not intellect, whatever you want to translate. But point, science, all these words mean the same thing more or less. And Sefer Hamada is officially a book of mitzvahs, just like the Homish Torah is a book of mitzvahs. There's a list of mitzvahs. These are the mitzvahs that we're going to discuss here. Mitzvahs Yidiyas Hashem, mitzvahs Havas Hashem, mitzvahs Yiras Hashem, mitzvahs and so on and so on. But he is thinking, what he's really doing here is, that's why it's important when we get to this, he has in his head two frames, like two structures. When you think of structures, that's why I think it's easy to start seeing how things match. In other words, if you ask someone, like, give me a summary of what are people for according to the people that the Rambam read, you can give them like a certain summary. It starts number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. Like there's some kind of structure, there's some kind of process. If you ask Aristotle, there's theoretical knowledge and metaphysical knowledge, there's practical knowledge, ethics, and political knowledge, and so on. So it's some kind of hierarchy even, but there's some kind of structure, and there's a way to get there. You're born, and you work on yourself, and you get somewhere. That's the structure that's one structure. And then there's structure number 2, which is Judaism, which is, what's the structure of Judaism? He invented that structure too. So there's the other one he didn't really invent. But this one he more or less created by himself, and he put a lot of work into this. It's not received, and the order of the Rambam is like this biggest chiddush in a certain sense, because the content, he more or less copies what it says in the Mishnah and so on.
He locked himself up in a room for 10 years.
Yeah, he worked, and he's based on earlier sources, but it's totally new. And he creates a structure, and he says this is the Yiddishkeit structure, the Tariq Mitzvahs organized by the 14 books and so on. And now, one of his like goals and his hidden goals, you're not going to see the saying anywhere explicitly that I know of. His hidden goal is to make these two structures into the same structure. So in other words, when he's organizing mitzvahs, he's not just randomly organizing them, and not just by sitting on his couch and thinking how it would make sense to organize them. He's organizing them more or less according to how he understands could fit with the structure of his philosophy that he has in his head. It's like he's literally doing.
Knowledge.
If you read, his scientific knowledge, what his science was. Yeah, like if you read some people nowadays doing in all kind of contexts similar things. If someone says these are 10 spheres and there's 10 personality types according to whatever psychologist, these are these, the Rambam does exactly this. Just a lot better than most of these people. But it does exactly that kind of work, of like saying this is this and this is this, and then it goes on and say, if you're not, you're amuritz also. That's not only not of philosophy, you're amuritz, and apikoidish or something. But that's his main thing. Now, and therefore, and I think it's very tricky, because he has to be yotzei both of these structures, and it's very hard. They don't entirely fit. As much as he makes them fit, there's always going to be pieces sticking out.
The cracks.
Yeah, you can see like the seams. You always see the seams. So, for example, like Sefer Hamada, if he would be free to just write his own theoretical structure, he could just write very clearly. You could start, and you see him starting with a structure, just very clear. And the whole Rambam in general, but Sefer Hamada in particular, because it's officially the theoretical knowledge book. Right? Everything else is practical knowledge, like what do you do? But Sefer Hamada is just what you should know, basically. All of it, just very important, all of it. You'll see a lot of things that are not, seems not, but at least that's what he says. And he seems starting with his structures. He has in his head this structure, I'm just saying in general, this very nice book that again, you could argue with a lot of details, but this book which says this is how the Rambam's world looks, and these are the 14 books, something like that. I really like the idea, although a lot of the details are probably wrong, but it shows you just the way that the Rambam is truly thinking, and he doesn't, probably at some level it's like a Dirish and stuff. But you see, for example, the Rambam starts with the existence of God, and in the first 4 chapters you see it very clearly, we ran through it a little bit. He starts with the existence of God, goes down to in Perek Bayis 2 angels, which he interprets as separate intellects. He just made that translation. So that his God is Aristotle's God, more or less, and his Maluchim are Aristotle's Maluchim, or God's another whole shmis. And then he goes down to the soul and to the lower world, to what he calls sublunar world, the world, this level.
The world of how you say this?
Yeah, and so on. So you see him very clearly working in his head. And then, of course, he says, okay, this is the first mitzvah, he's Hashem, second mitzvah, Hashem, third mitzvah, and so on. And in each one, he has to make a whole pshetel, how the mitzvah of Yis Hashem is like principle number 1 in the system, that philosophical system that I have. And now the mitzvah of Yis Hashem, Hashem is principle number 2, and so on. And sometimes he works hard, and you see him doing this work. And Sefer HaMitzvahs and other places, like how do you put these things together? Like, what's the drish? What's the shtickle tayyid to make them work? But that's more or less what he's thinking of. We have to go through the whole Sefer, and then if you read Sefer Hamada already in Perek Hay, and then someone else, what's going on? For me?
Yeah, for you.
I'm good. If you can ask someone else if they want. Yeah, you could see him working with the structure, but you could see right away, for example, if you read the Torah, just starting from there, and Perekai, and if you read Eli Lamdash Sefer and the Rambam, it starts on Perekai, because none of them understand what he's doing in the first 4 chapters. And then Perekai is about Kiddush Hashem. Kol Beis Yisrael Mitzvah Kiddush Hashem, like you learn the Chaim, that's his first shtickle. And it's just a halacha of which mitzvahs have Shama and Nephesh, and then they start talking about halachas which shemas you're allowed to erase, and so on, halachas kedushes Hashem, and so on. And in his mind, these are very connected, because think about it. I just explained to you that God is the most important principle. Now, what are like the halachas that belong to that principle? Okay, you need to respect God, there's some level that you... And just the practicality of that or something, and it totally matches in his head. Like, he didn't just randomly jump from one thing to another. But when you don't realize, you think, okay, he made a list of mitzvahs, and these are mitzvahs about, like, you don't get at all what's going on. It's not just associating, it's really, I wouldn't say that he thinks that the halacha is like a mushal for that or something. You could get into detail, that's right, so that's the level where it starts to stick out, because he has to, then once he talks about halachas Kiddush Hashem, he has to copy whatever the Gemara says. He can't make up his own halacha. That's one thing he can do. I mean, he could summarize and organize, but he can't just change it, and he doesn't see any need to change it also, but... but he has to copy, and you'll have a bunch of details that are totally, even if I tell you, let's say I tell you this idea, I'm going to get to hilchos tshuva, and if I tell you okay, so Kiddush Hashem is technically just about the importance of this first principle. How important is it? According to halacha, it's important enough that you should let yourself be killed for it. What exactly now? What are the details of it? Okay, now you're in Talmud land, right? What if it's a goy, and what if it's a goy on Tuesday, and so on, Okay. And then he has to copy all those things, and a lot of those details are not going to match already. And the Rambam, if it would be up to him, he might have changed a lot of those details in the sense of if we're just working from first principles, but he's not, because he has to. He's stuck, or let's say stuck. He's obligated to. He's committed to all these details, and so on. Now, in the same way, I think hilchos tshuva is a very good example for this. Where am I going with this? And hilchos tshuva. Hilchos tshuva, the Rambam does, and you have to really, this is what he's doing. And the whole Sefer Ramadan, hilchos tshuva is the last one, I think, right? It's the last one. Very important that it's the last one.
Hilchos tshuva is innovative. No one else does hilchos tshuva.
It's beside the the Rambam already said this. The Rambam said the Rambam invented the idea of hilchos tshuva. Again, he doesn't say those words. He says that if not the Rambam, we wouldn't know what tshuva is or something like that. Yeah, it's a huge innovation. The Tzaddik work started it, but the Rambam more or less innovated. But we have to realize what innovation is, and in my opinion, and I'm just giving you facts or my thoughts, or to prove it as a whole thing. As far as I can tell, the Rambam's hilchos tshuva is trying to say. I'll give you an easy way to work with the structure. If we work with the structure, it would work something like this. And again, the beginnings and the ends are always where the Rambam, in a certain sense, I think, wrote the beginnings and the ends of books and then fit it in the middle. Also, halachas. You'll see it sometimes, not always. This is a good example of it being like that. Because if you think of the structure of Sefer Ramadan is something like this. Starts off with the first principle, right? God is the first principle. And it ends, if you look in the end of hilchos tshuva, it ends with the human end. Literally, with anikra end in English. End meaning goal, or tachlis in Lashon HaKodesh. Or in Greek, perfection really, or shlemut, shleimus. And the last perek in hilchos tshuva, which nobody knows what it's doing in hilchos tshuva. Until I came around, nobody realized what's going on. No, everyone the Rambam in the last 3 paragraph of the hilchos starts talking about everything until then. Sort of, we could connect the tshuva. There's some things that don't work, but so then he starts talking about what is elam haba. Discussed it yesterday. That's like his discussion. So elam haba is this, and elam haba is that, and goes on, and then he talks about lishma. They need to be avodas Hashem lishma and me'ahava, and that's the 10th perek, and he finishes with that. Havas Hashem. Like what? Well, the hilchos havas Hashem we already had, and he said that third and perek best. Olam haba, whatever. It's a nice theological question. What is olam haba? What's it got to do with hilchos tshuva? No shaykhs, right? So if you don't have the other structure in your head, you don't understand anything what's going on. But if you do, then it's totally simple. Like it's obvious, and it's you can't argue with this. If you have another structure, then if you read Aristotle's Ethics, and again as interpreted by the people that Rambam read, Avicenna and Al-Farabi and so on, they all saw that there's I could say it like this, and it'd be a very nice way of saying it. There's 2 ladders, in the sense, there's the way the universe is, in which God, it's important, God is the first principle, and everything else, like Kabbalim have the most popularized version of something like this. There's God, and then there's Spheres, and the Shamas, whatever, sort of comes down to here. So there's a hierarchy, like a ladder. The Rambam calls it Yaakov Vini's ladder. Says that that's the name of Yaakov Vini's ladder. But now, but the problem with us and Aristotle talks about this in an intellectual context, we don't work with this ladder. Our education, the progress of human life is not going to start with God and end with dead people or whatever.
It's not going to end with himself also, right?
What do you mean? Let me finish. What time is it? I used to have a thing. You let me talk for 40 minutes and then you talk. Okay. I don't know. Oh, I have a clock there. I forgot. I put a clock there for this reason. And humans don't. This is a very weird, like a weird thing. I don't know, weird. You should wonder about this if you understand the structure of the universe to be in this very there's a first principle, a second principle, a third. It goes down. Both our understanding of that and also our life progress, both of them, work in totally the opposite direction. And even the human life, like you start off as a little baby, which is totally basically a plant. I mean, almost can't even move. If the definition of an animal versus a plant is that it can move itself, babies are plants. I mean, think about it. And then you start to become like a little, like a 2-year-old and so on, until maybe, hopefully, you get somewhere. So it's the opposite. There's like a progress from 0 to somewhere, or from the last level to the first level. That's in the reality, and not in the Shorish and Shama and and the same thing is about human intellect. Aristotle talks about this explicitly a few times. We always understand things backwards. And this is a problem for him, or at least a question for him. We understand everything backwards. In other words, for example, understanding to him means demonstrating things. In other words, I understand the yisod, like the principle, and from the principle, and by necessity, according to him, but in any case, comes out all of the details, right? All of the, if, for example, to him, if you know what a man is, you'll understand why a man has 2 hands and 2 feet and so on. There's basically science tries to do this also, right? All science is working in this similar structure.
They unpack it.
But the understanding is like being ma'amad al-achas, finding the principle. No, in modern science, philosophy of science, you could wonder if there's really such a principle and so on. But at least the ideal of understanding is always going to be that. We want to find what's the one thing that makes the many things work or be the way they are, right? And so on. You see a bunch of things moving, and you find out there's one thing we call gravity that makes everything move. So now, once you know gravity, you can understand how everything else will happen. Well, that's at least the theory. Right now. But the problem is that our learning works backwards. In other words, it's inductive, not deductive, right? In modern terms, right? We start from a bunch of data that don't make sense.
Inductive? What is
Inductive is a Yiddish min haklal la prat and min haprat la klal. Okay?
Inductive or deductive?
Yeah, deductive is min haklal la prat, right? If you know, like in Midas Hadrash, if you know that every Yid has to sit in Sekah, then also you have to sit in the Sekah, right? And then Aptat al-Klal is like if there's a whole bunch of halachas about what's a Mekabel Tim, but then you can figure out what Mekabel Tim means, That's how we learn halacha also in an inductive way. The Rambam very much tried, by the way, this is another thing, the Rambam very much tried to make halacha deductive. It's very questionable if it worked. But the Mishnah is totally inductive, totally starts from the bottom, from the details, from the little things, and then never tries to get it. Actually, Chazal are explicitly against theories. It's like this statement, the most anti-Aristotelian Mama Chazal is, Ein lemedem and aklalas, and this time it says Zaklal, no such a thing as a klal. Just another detail. That's the thing we always interpret it. It's just Zaklal lasiyamai. One more case. They don't believe in making klalim. Although the pshat of the Mishnah probably is that it's making a klal. But Chazal don't think deductively.
They prove the principle with the examples.
They don't even assent to the principle. No, they're not looking for a principle at all. They're very happy with the examples staying the way they are. That's what it looks like. Okay, then we could talk about this, but that's another. There might be reasons. But so that's the problem. Now the problem is that I'm just showing you both if you talk about like moral progress or ethical progress, in order to become a human being, and this is very important, become a human beings. This is, I think everyone agrees to this, but that's in the sense that it's very intuitive, and the ethics, or Aristotle's book of ethics, very much takes this intuition and makes a whole thing out of it, which is that the real weird thing about humans is that they are not created or not born what they are, or what they should be, which is just another way of saying what they are ideally, what they are. A table is supposed to be a table, and it's a table, and that's all. Well, after it was made or whatever. And a human, if you ask what it is, not a human in the biological sense, but a human in like, you would say the menschliche sense, right? You have to be a mensch. I tell my kids this, and I use this example always to explain it, right? I tell my kid to be a mensch, and my daughter always used to answer, what do you mean I'm be a mensch? What do you think I am? Like, no, you should be a mensch, right? So a mensch is this weird, yeah, a mensch is this weird thing that's not by default what he is, or what he should be. What should is just the word that we use to connect what you are to what you're not yet.
You're saying they don't behave according to what their essence is.
You could say something like that, but you're thinking in a different kind of terms.
Last week, is he like in a potential?
Yeah, I can't, but I can't do that. You know what I mean, but I can't now. But that's the point. It's a fact. Humans, you could say it in that way. That's a platonic way. But that's a platonic way of saying it. But that's philosophy. It's a platonic way of saying it. But there's still a way of saying it is more that the thing of being a person is in some sense more potential than actual. That's what I was saying. You could be. To be a person means to be able to have the possibility of being a person. That's how he calls what you call essence. More of like a potential language. Potential is also a concept that people more or less understand.
Is that where
in other words,
comes from the man, the highest of the animals, and if he's not, he's the worst of them?
Yeah, of course. And different, it's based on these kind of... a human, to be a human, now we have to figure out what a being human is. That's another whole discussion. I'll tell you what the Rambam thinks in a second. But the point is, where did I get to this? I'm talking about one thing. Right? Morally, ethically, and intellectually. In all ways. Basically, in every kind of human, everything that has the label human on it, has this backwards thing. That understands things in the opposite of their nature, the opposite of the way the things are. Like, you start understanding the tree from the leaves and not from the root. Always. By definition. You start, you want to become a tzaddik, you start by being a very small, like doing the very small things, like giving one prit of a tzedakah, and then maybe you'll become what's a tzaddik? A tzaddik is a guy that gives a lot of tzedakah, let's say, right? But how do you become that? You don't just become a tzaddik and then start giving tzedakah. You start, like the Rambam says, Lafi Rav HaMas, right? Oh, wow. This is a whole thing. You start giving a little tzedakah, and then maybe you'll become a tzaddik, right? It's backwards. It's backwards from the logical structure of things, right? And also the metaphysical structure of things. So therefore, I'm just... Oh.
You're doing ayahuasca or not?
No, this is just plain tea.
Not to forget it's mint.
It's plain mint tea. No, I have already. This one. And honey cookies. And it's just with the whole thing my wife likes. So therefore, let's wrap up this nikita. So therefore, humans, there is a backward, there's an ascent, like that's how I would see it. And this is the language that the Rambam uses.
What I understand you're saying is that there's an avoida to get to. There's a value in getting to your potential.
Right, yeah. But all I'm just saying now is that there's two directions. I'm just. You have to. That's another discussion.
I'm actually trying to understand.
No, I understand the point. Let's skip that because you bracket that because that's a discussion exactly how to define that. And we said, but what I'm saying, I'm thinking about the structure, like an order. I'm like so there's two orders basically. There's an real order, like God's order, like God's eyes view, we could call it, right? Which is milmal lamata, you could call it, right? From top down, that's one order. And like if I write a book, that's one way to write a book. That's like I'm trying to interpret a book. If I write a book, one way is to write it in God's order. The Etz Chaim is written in God's order, right? Starts from Ein Sof, goes down all the way to wherever it tries to go down, to the Olam Hazeh. Okay, and it takes a long time. If you people that start Etz Chaim, they never get to this world. That's their problem. Because it's so long, such a fat book, and you're like stuck in the Olam HaKidim somewhere and never. Anyways, another way to write a book would be the opposite direction. In other words, the human direction. And there's Shara, for example, if in Kabbalah times, it's written in that way, right? Starts from here. Start from knowing yourself. Start from things that are closer. In Aristotle's language, things that are closer to us, but further from reason, further from logos, from the way that things really are. And start from there, and then try to go up, Now that I understand myself, I start to understand where I'm from, and so on, and go up, okay? So these are the two structures. And the Rambam understands, now, of course, these two places, in other words, the man ends where God started. In other words, the Sefer HaMadeh finishes where it started, right? Because it starts with God being the first principle, which then creates its effects and so on. And it ends by man knowing God. By man getting to after, you call it love or knowledge, this is nacha, it doesn't matter. He calls it the hava al-lishma and so on, yeah. Me hava al-lishma. But I know them haba, all these terms to mean the same thing. That's the goal of the human. To get, and sort of going backwards. It's just going backwards, but that's the structure of the book. And now the Rambam sees hilchos tshuva, and especially hilchos tshuva, and very much, and I could prove it to you from language, but mostly I know it's true because if you have the structure in your head, then it's obvious that it's that way. tshuva is just a word for saying, it's just a very good word for picking out this problem that humans have, that they need to become something, that they need to progress. Let's talk about progress or steig or something like that, right? No animal steigs, only guys in yeshiva steig, right? Evolve. Yeah, okay, but they don't have evolution, so we'll try to use all ancient language. So, tshuva is literally, and this is very interesting because the Rambam is the one that created this, made tshuva mean this. Very important. He's the one that made tshuva mean this. In other words, now it's very popular to say that tshuva is about becoming better and becoming a better person and so on. That's not what it says in Shulchan Aruch, in the Gemara, in the Mishnah. Even in the Rambam in the first two Prukim, if you'll notice, it doesn't say that at all. If you notice the Rambam, and I did a whole sheet.
His tune after.
No, even before that. I give a whole sheet on this, on reading the first two Prukim Rambam last year or 2 years ago, where I showed you how the Rambam is like getting the data of the Gemara and then trying very hard to move that into his understanding of tshuva. That's why I see him doing. Like he has to, like he hasn't always these two like commitments. He has to like give you the halachas and then, well, really it's about this, and the halachas are somehow about that. He never finishes explaining how the halachas are about that. His students do explain. There's people that they go in his malach and explain it, but they're all dachkim, like whatever. But you see what he's doing. So, but obviously, tshuva is literally like if you reach now. I'm trying to show you like how do you say magnify the chiddush, right? Because tshuva al pi pshat is very simple. You've sinned. You've got a problem with God. He's going to give you punishments or whatever. You go. You say sorry. Do whatever you have to do. Bring a carbon. Say vidi, and we'll be back. We'll go back, right? Yeah. But that's a very radical thing because now we realize that he's doing something radical because he's saying that tshuva is not about getting back together with God in the sense that you usually think. Like we'll pay back to some. There's all kinds of ways. I've written a few weeks ago a thing with 7 different descriptions of tshuva, but. In any of those ways, one of them is the Rambam's way, but in any of those other ways, it's some kind of it's a business going on. We're in the low and the minus. We get back to whatever it is. And the Rambam, when he said, for example, that's an example. When the Rambam says tshuva is just stopping to sin, that's a crazy thing. He doesn't say anywhere. He made that up. I mean, he has a psek gemura, but he misinterpreted to mean this. Doesn't matter. It doesn't say that. Because what he's trying to say is that tshuva is the point of it is to make you become better. And when he says openly in Perek Zayin that tshuva is not really from a virus. It's mostly from midas ros and so on. Now midas ros for the Rambam is, if you realize, because the Rambam really believes that all mitzvahs are really, and amazingly, Reb Chaim Vital says the same thing in his book Shara Kedusha. Amazingly, because he read Rambam, but he doesn't realize how radical it is, or he does, and he's just fine. But because he thinks that all mitzvahs are just to educate you to have good midas, whatever his definition of good midas are.
It makes sense because avidas come from midas ruas. So obviously he's going to.
No, but that's already, you already believe a certain. I'm talking about questioning premises. This is a good premise to question because in the old-fashioned Jews, and there's still some Jews like that, but they already learned the Rambam, all these people. But if you read the Chumash or if you read Chazal, for the most part, you don't get this kind of ideas. You don't even get the concept of there being such a thing. Okay, I'm just saying, a human being that has midas, that has virtues and all these things, it doesn't have this picture. This picture that you have, that you think is true, I'm not saying it's not true, is a philosophical picture. It comes from, mostly if you do like the history of philosophy, it comes from the Greeks. And especially Aristotle and the tradition after him, which and developed this idea.
The idea that we came to
midas, not even what. That's 1 second. That's another question. I'm saying this. He's saying that avidas come from midas. In the Chumash type that there's avidas and they're the problem by themselves. Why they're problem? Because God hates them. Whatever. In the youth approach. Okay, I can't. I'm getting off track. But I'm just trying to point that there's a chiddush here. And of course, the Rambam accepts this chiddush, and therefore Yitzchok says, like you're right that once you accept the chiddush, it follows logically what he's saying. I'm just trying to show you that it's a chiddush because there could have been a different pshat,
You're saying before the Rambam, this was not known to be so.
Yeah, and Judaism from Rabbi Yanu doesn't say it. Don't speak about tshuva in this way.
I can't even fathom how you can
right. That's the thing. You could always fathom differently if you think enough. Okay. But Kitsar says so. What I'm trying to say is so he switches, and to him tshuva is like the mitzvah that matches best to this concept. Basically, if you think about it, all other mitzvahs don't match, right? You have to keep Shabbos, whatever. God likes keeping Shabbos and so on. But tshuva is basically saying you have been bad and you should become good. And the Rambam, you've been bad, is not a b'di'evet. That's very important. He doesn't think of it for the most part. He starts off with Kili saying that if they're an avayra, do tshuva. Really, he's not thinking about that. He's thinking of the fact that people are born bad. or bad is not the correct term, but they're born not whole. That incomplete is the correct. No. That's what I'm saying. Not original. He's not original. Not at all. It's not incomplete. The bad is the wrong word. But that's why he shifts shiva from becoming from bad to good, from becoming from nothing something. They're not complete. That's the correct. That's his correct terminology.
Bad and good are also not major. It's
what?
Rambam doesn't think bad and good is really
right. There's no such thing as bad and good, anyways. But I can't shut on this. Wait. Bad and good mean this. Right. Bad and good just mean bad is just a word for incomplete, really. So you have the terminology.
You could say about the truth.
Right. No, that's not okay. Wait. Let me everything. I'm trying to give you a story. People are born incomplete, and therefore tshuva is what all people have to do all the time. It's just what avoid this and again there's a certain progress. It's toward a goal, right? And again, if you know to him the end goal is to know God, and that's what al-mahabba is. And since al-mahabba is presented in Chazal as the goal where we get to, so obviously it has to be knowing God. There's no source for thinking that's al-mahabba. Whatever, that's what it is. Too bad. It's a mushal. Everything else is a mushal. You know, that's how he's thinking, and that's why the end of hilchos shiva, which is clearly getting you to that goal. Very simple. You know, we had to pass through a bunch of halachas on the way and so on, and which are probably helpful things. I'm not saying that. And the end, we're going to get to this, which is he calls Lishma, Hashem. But these are just all his language for
the ultimate bliss.
The ultimate, yeah. He calls
he always has a concentration problem, right, with all these mitzvahs that they don't.
Shine. This is the nikid about this. If you want, I could tell you about the shofar also, which is somewhere in the middle of this. But that's just the framework of the whole thing. I'll tell you a few little things that show you something interesting. Okay, now the Rambam. That's why I printed you this halacha, because I wanted to show you that when you know some codes, you could find out certain things that are obviously true, but nobody notices them. Okay, so the Rambam did this to Tkiyah, by the way, and again, this is another thing that you should question. It's no source for this pshat of Tkiyah. The Rambam made it up by himself. There's Epsam Chazal that people claim it says, doesn't say. It doesn't say anywhere, and it's the opposite pshat. If you read the Mishnah and the Gemara, Tkiyah shofar is not this very radical change that the Rambam did from Tkiyah shofar, from something that calls to God to something that calls to people.
Again?
In the Mishnah and the Gemara, it says that Tkiyah shofar is lezakurim. Lezakurim meaning reminds God. It's a tefillah. It's a kind of tefillah. It goes from us, calls a shofar, and that's the literal image of a shofar. Because maybe God is sleeping somewhere, we're waking him up. Okay, I'll pick up that's right? That's our shofar. It's a kind of tefillah. That's the pshat of the Pusik, pshat of the Gemara, pshat of the Medrushim, and so on. Okay? Now the Rambam changes the whole meaning. It says that shofar, when the Baal Shkai is blowing, who's he blowing to? Who's the address? It's not God anymore. It's you. Wow. He changed the whole thing, because of course he doesn't believe that you could please God by blowing shofar or anything. You could please God. Pleasing God means becoming a perfect human. So it's to you. That's one huge change that he did. Okay.
Before the Rambam, we believe that
people still believe that. I mean,
shofar is to wake up God.
Wake up God is a crude imagery that I'm saying. It's calling to God. Calling to God. So the kol shofar is calling to God. That's one pshat at least. Push it up pshat. It's a form of prayer. You could see the Briskerov says this. Briskerov has a shikl Torah that says this. That shofar is a kind of tefillah. He has a dik and someone that Rambam that the tzalochas that shtim because of this, whatever.
Needs to be understood.
Okay, and the Rambam thinks tefillah also is backwards, so it's beside it. But the Briskerov understood this. No, it's the pshat. If you read, the Briskerov is actually, nobody knows, but he's a very good pshat learner, and a lot of things that he says are the true pshat. Okay, that was what people taught before. Okay, and now the Rambam did something very radical and took Tkiyah shofar from hilchos Tkiyah shofar, which is in the Sefer Zmanim, whatever, and he put it into Sefer Hamada. He switched the location of the meaning of it, not halachas. Halachas are still hilchos Tkiyah shofar, but it doesn't say hilchos Tkiyah shofar. And people think don't realize it's a question they should ask every time the Rambam does something weird like this. Like, why did he put the remes of Tkiyah shofar in hilchos tshuva? He should have. It would be very nice. And the hilchos Tkiyah say, you should know this remes. He does that, and sometimes it's not like the Rambam doesn't have that idea of having such a structure. There are halachas which, like hilchos mikvahs, famously ends. Mikvah is also a remes. He should be me'adas, whatever. He does that. He could do it in Tkiyah shofar, but he didn't do it because really he's reframing Rosh Hashanah and Aseres Matshiva and Yom Kippur around his concept of tshuva. And he's saying, I'm going to skip the first line, but he's saying that Tkiyah shofar has a remes. Well, should I give what time is it now? I'll skip the thing about remes. But he says that this is what shofar is saying. Okay, and I want to show you. I'm going to make a gzeira shava, meaning search words and see how the Rambam uses these words in other places and prove that that's what it means. And it's a way of working. You can exam, but I think that is true. But I'll read it and show you a few sentences that you should notice that he doesn't say what the Rabbunim think he says. And the Tkei Shofar Drushas. Okay, it says like this: wake up, Mishnaschem. Okay, so that makes sense. Then Akitz in the Domim. Okay, it's another language for the same thing, right? Wake up. Okay, the first two lines, right? I should have copied just from line 3, right? In your bag. This is Halacha Dal. Hilchos tshuva Perek Gimel. Yeah. I could go into details of that context, but I wanted to start in line Gimel, right? Keloima. So what is the shofar saying, right? What's the thing? What's the Tkei Shofar? It says like this: wake up. Okay, number 1, wake up. He says it twice. Mishayim, Nedomim. Okay. Maybe there's a chilek, maybe not. Wake up, okay? That's obviously because he's thinking of a shofar that's making a lot of noise, so it's waking you up, okay?
Different types of sleep.
Yeah, it could be. The halacha, there's a difference.
One is dimling and one is...
yeah, and that's technically, I don't know, but...
One is napping and one is deep sleep.
Right. I think, which is which? The Shina...
Not kind of deep sleep.
I wrote here what it says in Hilchos...
napping, you know?
Yeah, in Faket, in Tardaima is deeper. That's what it says in Hilchos Krishma, I think.
Okay.
I think, like by Yapel Hashem Elokim Tardaima, he was like unconscious. It's not only sleeping.
Trance. I thought Tardaima was a trance.
Okay, but it's deeper than sleep.
No.
Okay, you could put a positive. Okay, I get the chat. Yeah, ich verstehe, but that's okay. But then he's not talking about that, right? Okay, so that's just his imagery for the shofar, right? It's like a wake up. By the way, he was mechadish this image. I don't even if someone claims that it says in Chazal that Tkei Shofar has to do with tshuva, the idea of it like being a wake up. And it sort of makes a lot of sense, right? Waking up, it sounds like an alarm clock or something. He figured this out. So you have to think about this. Like, why does his mind, and nobody else's mind went to this association before him? It goes like an alarm clock. Like, why is he thinking of this imagery of being asleep and waking up?
For me, it's very simple, because if you're sinning, it's obviously because you're not getting it, so mostly you're sleeping.
Right. So this has a context. This waking up has a context, and there's explicit lashonis in the Rambam that shows you that he has it means something to him. This waking up. It's not just a mushal for doing tshuva. Waking up, wake up. Okay, it has faket like I'm with you. Like him waking up has a certain meaning. It's intellectual meaning in some sense or spiritual meaning, and since the shofar it sounds like a wake up, so it's a very good shishtel. It works very well. The mahalach. So that's number 1. Then if you see it, okay, chipsim masayichem sort of makes sense, you know, mefashpish b'masav, chizri b'tshiva, okay, that's normal language, okay. Then he starts saying other things that are not in like normal tshiva language, right? Zichri b'rachem, remember your creator, remember God. How does the shofar say this?
Again, to me, the
exactly. If you wake, if
part and parcel of waking up.
Okay, but then now read what he says. Now when you're gonna wake up, this is what you're gonna do, and this is where I think it becomes even more radical. He says, who should wake up? Okay, he doesn't say you people that didn't daven before Zman Tefillah, and you people that ate a carbon to the day after was allowed, and you people that were over increased in Mrs. Bezdin, you know, that it says in the beginning of the Shiva, that's the list, you know. Avirus the Rabbunan, Avirus Shechayev Alem Krises, Avirus, like it says in Al-Chet. It doesn't say that.
He's going to the source.
He says something very different. He says something very different. He says you forget the truth, and truth is always a code by him. He has like go a whole sheet just what emes means. And where do you forget the truth? In something called Havli Azman. And the time means just this world. He calls the world of time or change. But the nonsense of Azman. That's your problem. So your problem is not that you're not a good Jew. Very important. This is universalizing, by the way. Very explicit universalizing. And I'll show you very beautiful. If you read Rambam,
what do you mean by
universalizing in the sense of becoming less Jewish. Okay, in the sense of not being particularly Jewish. In other words, if you read the Rambam, almost every time, especially when he discusses Tachlis Odom, like this level of doing tshuva, not just of being a good Jew, he never forgets to add a word. When he says do mitzvahs, he always says and know the truth, or something like that. I just was reading in Hilchos Shiva, he says something like, show you a very clear space, but maybe I think I wrote it down somewhere and I don't. Give me a second. Yeah, Perek Ches Halacha Hai, where he says what to put. Perek Ches. Not true. Perek Halacha Vav. I wrote the wrong number. It says like this: Shama talking about the Tova, what the goal is, and Shama is like saying the goal of mitzvahs is to get to Olam Haba, right? And this is his language when it says Halacha Vav, Perek Ches Halacha Vav, like trying to prove that it's important. Like people might have the mistake and say, well, it doesn't sound exciting. Like money and sex is more exciting. Okay, it says like this: Shema teikel beinecha toivas. If a tidmash ein schara mitzvahs So, now read just this line. You would think that this is a small thing, look, whatever, going living forever, whatever. It doesn't sound amazing, and you'll think she'ein schar ha-mitzvahs ve'hayoysa odam sholem bedarkei ha'emes elo liyatzayich l'shayis. What happened? We're talking about mitzvahs, and suddenly we're talking about a whole different thing. To be sholem bedarkei ha'emes. And
very covert.
The Rambam, you read it 1,000 times in Shiva, you don't notice that he does this. I'll give you another example that's really crazy. The Rambam in hilchos Ishes and hilchos Sirabiyah has instructions for guiding. Okay, it says how do you teach the basics of Judaism, because you have to know a little bit in order to become a ger. And he does a very radical thing over there. But he says, and one of the things he says, you teach a ger like this, that we believe in Torah and God and the mitzvahs. V'she'en sham sadik gama. There's the goal. In other words, there's no ela bal chachma sha'ois mitzvahs ele v'yodam. That's why you tell a ger, okay? A goy comes and said, what does Jews believe? We believe that you need to be a philosopher and do mitzvahs. What was that? And know the mitzvahs, right? They're not enough to do them. You have to know them, know what they're for. Otherwise, you're not going to get the Ganai, like Toilam Haba, to the goal. And so he's very clear, and almost every time you could see, Shama, I should make a list of the times that he does this kind of sneaky thing. He always puts in Torah v'chachma, he never forgets to say only Torah. Because he understands that he says Torah, you can think that it means Shechnor Charav. But it doesn't. It means Torah as interpreted by me, and the Baal Shem Tov and so on. Similar. So he's very clear about this. So you see them doing it here, right? The Zichri Barachim, Zichrin is also, right? Because probably interpreting Zikurin, right? Zikurin, Yem Zichroines, right? Zichri Barachim. That's also a very radical pshat. Again, because Zikurin, Yem Zikurin was meant to be that God remembers us. And now it's us remembering God. He also switched the direction, right? And what are you doing? You're sleeping, right? So now you understand, now he explains what the sleep was. The sleep was that you forgot the truth, and therefore you're wasting your time with Dvurim Shleiyov Leyatzil. And now what should you do? Very interesting. This is where it connects to my series officially that's talking about this all. What's the
difference between Idea Sheikhim Lem Hevel Azman?
Again, it's I don't know. So it's connected now thinking. It's connected the two things of the Shainim and the Nedumim. I don't know. Ich weiß nicht. No, I know what each of these. That's why I wrote a paragraph on each of these words with sources of what exactly he means. Mm-hmm. But I'm just showing you a few points. And then he says, now basically, until now, interesting, you should search, but I searched. Until now, everything is language from that you could find in the Siddur and Tanakh. Almost every word. Besides, Shoichim es emes b'havli azman is philosophical language. I don't know that, even the word havli azman, and there's a lot of the Hantek Darshunim, and not only, are very worried about this word havli azman, def toiris al-gabe toiris, what it should mean. Because it's a weird language. If you could read the whole Chazal and the whole Chumash and know it by heart and never have this. I'm not speaking about the content, right? The expression, there's time, and time is the nonsense of the Hevel is the nonsense of time, or something like that.
Wasting time, no?
Yeah, but that's not what he means. He means the waste. It's they had this language where Zman was like a stand-in for this world or something Pigei Zman. There's such a right we have in Sforim the problems, the tzudas of time or something like that.
Why can't it be pushed Hevel and man like wasting?
Yeah, no, it doesn't mean that. The wasting time definitely wasn't the language. Even the Rambam didn't have. We know that this is language. But then, if you go even further, then a lot of the language is Chazal. Like in the Sid that says Yishainim, Maikes Neshainim, Eirin Nedomim, whatever, Chapsim Masaichem, and so on. The Habitul Nefesh I looked for in the whole Tanakh, but not with using my computer, and I didn't find. I'll give you the Bush Pshat now. He said a Pshat, Rabbi Cohen, but I think he was right almost. Maybe by one of the.
I didn't hear.
The way you would think that you could understand yourself what his pshat would be, but this is the language, and Lowy V'Yasel, for example, is a pasuk in Yirmiyah. It's talking about Avodah Zarah. Interesting. Toy Hevel. It makes sense.
It makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. But he's thinking of that pasuk or that kind of expression. It's language. Again, Chipsi Masaichem is a pasuk in Eichel, right? Nachs Drachani and so on. All of these things are psikim. Zichri Berachim is also a pasuk in Kedes. Chayres Berecha. So it's psikim. And Habidl Nefesh Zaichem, I didn't find any pasuk where you could find the Shoresh Habayit next to Nefesh. There's no pasuk. Maybe if you find one, I'll be very happy. Not even like a piyat. Maybe there's you think of a piyat, not a psidder. I don't know. I didn't find anything. So therefore, we have to explain it according to the Seichel, right?
And what's push up?
So I don't know what everyone thinks the push up is. I don't know.
How do you learn?
I'll tell you what the Rambam means. What the Rambam means is cure for your soul. Okay, this was Socrates' language. Socrates said that he teaches people to care for their soul. That was his language. And habiti means care. The Rambam actually has a parak in Nevech where he explains habiti doesn't mean looking, right? Because like if they look into your heart or whatever, I'm not talking about something with your eyes. It's a concept. I mean, I'm translating it as care right now. It's a nice way, but you could say think or attend to, right? Give attention to, things like that. That's what habita would mean. And it means care for your soul. And caring for your soul, now I'm saying Socrates for a very purpose, because this was then, and Aristotle, they all in this language. Socrates' whole thing was saying that to be a good person, again, which is ending at wherever the end of humans are. That's what was very talking about a lot about how people care for their bodies and don't care for their soul. And caring for your soul means being a philosopher and getting to that. But
focus
you have
on the
to.
Spirit.
Yes, okay, spirit, again, even soul is a bad word. We should find a better word because it means people have a lot of associations with these words. But the word is, and again, I'll make it clear another thing just to sharpen the difference. In Chazal and in Chemesh...
is spirit, no? What does he mean by nafsh?
What we call, right, it means your soul or your mind, what we would call soul or mind, or intellect. Well, we'll get to it. But he has definitions for nefesh. The Rambam, this I don't have to. I'm not even imagining. The Rambam explicitly says what he means by nefesh, and he says it openly in the Chashiva in the end. And he talks about. But I want to just give you a little more clarity for why this is chiddush. Again, because you could read, and I discussed this in the earlier things many times. You could read the entire Chazal and the entire Chemesh and never have the idea that like the way of saying what a person should do is that you should say care for your soul more than you care about your body. This language, and not even talking about the concepts. You could argue about concepts until forever. But this language does not exist in Kol HaTorah.
The contrast between the two.
Not only, again, you're talking about a concept. I'm very much simpler. There was no Tana or Hamoira could be imagined coming into this bench and say, Rabbi, you people are caring about your body too much, you should care about your soul. They never would say that. They might say things that mean the same thing ultimately. That's very hard for me to argue with. About this ambiguating concepts, that's another thing. We could figure that out. But I'm just showing you the language. This is language that we get from Socrates. Again, maybe even he's the first one that I know that uses this language. And it comes with whole metaphysics, like you're saying. There's a contrast between the body and the soul, and your soul wants one thing and your body wants one thing. All these language, in the Chazal, there's all kinds of languages that they have. They don't have, Nephesh Bahamas is literally Aristotle's language. Nephesh Bahamas is translated Aristotle, animal, soul, of English. In the Greek, Suki anim zen, something like that. It's a Greek word, literally. Like when you see Tanya saying the Tanya Shtet Nefesh Bahamas is the translation of a Greek term, just historically. I'm not saying that the meaning could have been there. It's not a stira even. It could be that the meaning is there. If it's true, it doesn't matter. But I'm just saying, I'm just giving it like terminology is the only way I could prove. Like I could show you something. The concept, ich weiß, it means that. From what we see, this language, Nephesh languages. I mean, the Chassidim know that they're saying new language, and they don't even deny that. But this is something that wouldn't make sense for anyone before the Rambam to say. Remember your soul. Basically, he's saying that. Look at your soul. And this is very important for him, and as it is for Aristotle and for all these people, because to them, to be a good person basically means that. And I'm not saying not in a Platonic way, that's why it's important. Because for him, what does it mean to get where you need to get? It basically means to create your soul. And if you read the Rambam in the end, and I wrote down some places where he uses exactly this language. It says like this.
It's generally used in association with A, right?
Where? Habita?
Yeah.
It's a pashtus. It's a shem for looking. Yeah, but probably used in certain contexts, certain connotations, and so on.
Look out for.
The Rambam. So this is what he says soul means. The Rambam in Perek Ches started talking about what is the goal, what is the toivat tefillin tzadikim, which is another thing of saying the soul, and then he says, this is. Kol Nefesh Amir Ben Yinazeh, just to be clear, it says, what do I mean when I say soul? Including in Perek Gimel, obviously. Kol Nefesh Amir Ben Yinazeh, Aina HaNeshama, Shetzricha Lagif. So the Rambam has a terminology that I don't know anyone uses. To him, there's a Nefesh and a Neshama. We discussed this. Did I do this last week with you? No, in the Yiddish class I did this.
What's the difference between Nefesh and Neshama?
So I think that he gets this from Pashas Bereshis. To him, Neshama, it matches with the Siddur, by the way, I was thinking. To him, Neshama is probably, he thinks something like breath. In other words, or for him, the form of the body. Okay?
I would think a hefech.
Now, okay, I know what you would think. That's the Rambam's terminology. That's the opposite of what everyone else has. So that's the fact. I can't help you. The Rambam's terminology, and he himself knows that it's not always consistent. But that's his, like, I think he probably got it from Parshas Bereshit, because in Parshas Bereshit, the Rambam has an stance like this, that it says Vayipa b'apav nishmas chaim, which literally means breath, right? And the Rambam understands that means whatever it is that makes the body a body, or the form of the body. I'm not explaining what form that.
Because it's like right.
Right. So he becomes a living animal. The person is a living animal, that is nishmas chaim of the person, and it's basically the same as, not the same, because he's human and he does things, he has imagination and so on.
The Shama is the only thing that's exclusively associated with
One second. No. The Rambam has those the opposite words. Of course, the language is not going to work. The Rambam doesn't care about terminology always being consistent. He says this openly, and so that he says you'll find psikim that where they mean the opposite. But like his main distinction, I could talk about this more, but I'm getting to my time limit. His main distinction is that he thinks like this. The Rambam thinks that there's two neshamas, and Aristotle thinks that, and there's different two neshamas. Okay, this is where I'm getting to, but I'm going to try to say it very clearly and as short as possible, and then we can make discussions. The Rambam thinks that it's like this. There is what he calls neshama, and I think, like I say, I think he gets this from the Pasuk of Yipov Chaim, and he definitely understands that Pasuk to be referring to what Aristotle calls the form of the body. And the important thing about this is that it died. The form of the body. Okay, tzurat, tziras, and agif. And, well, I can't get was the form. I'm going to flats. The point of the main point is that this dies. Very important. It dies. Okay? It dies. In other words, it needs the body to exist. Just like when you take a table and you break it, it's not a table anymore. Where did the table go? That's the form. It went nowhere. There's wood left, but there's no table left. Okay? In the same way, you take a person and you make him stop being alive. There's a body left, but there's no person left. And where did the person go? Nowhere. It just became back. He went back. Okay, it might be a little more complicated than this, but the pashtus is it goes nowhere. It doesn't survive death. It doesn't. That was the language. Masha. Now the Rambam said, but this is not really what being a person is. Very important. That's what being an animal is, or even human animal, like the nefesh bahamis part. That's not what being a person is. What being a person is, and according to him, doesn't say in the pasuk of creating a person. It says only in one pasuk, which pasuk says what a soul of a person is. No guess. Okay, that's the pasuk where it says that God gave a person a soul. And why? What's Selim Elehim? Says the Rambam in Perek Bez, and he says in the Torah and so on. Selim Elehim is your mind, right? Because the mind, and how is it similar to God? It's not God, but it's very similar to God. It's a godly kind of thing, or similar to God. It's similar to God because of this, because it doesn't need a body to work, because it can think without tools. Just like God doesn't need like a body, which really means doesn't need tools to help him, doesn't need implements, just wants things, like, so to speak, wants things to happen and they happen. In a similar way, the human intellect doesn't need a body to work. It does need a body to get there, so we get back to the same problem. We don't start there, so we have to, in order to get there, you need to have a body. But once you got there, you don't need a body anymore, right? That's another. These things are I'm just being merikatz. But the kitzur is, it doesn't need a body, and therefore it survives death. That's why it doesn't die, because it never was in the body to begin with. It's not really that it dies. Kamash Malon doesn't die. It's just not a kind of thing that dies, right? Makes sense to you? Okay, so that's Hadui Dechsev. Okay, I'm getting this is complicated problems. I'm just saying the basic definition. Okay, because that's what Nephesh means.
There's nothing else? There's only these three things?
Okay, no, there's a lot more things. Okay.
Now, according to the Rambam.
The more important, no, there's a lot of things, but the important distinction here is between Shama and Nephesh is the seichel, what he calls mind, but not what you think seichel. In other words, we don't think of seichel in the way that he thinks, so it's going to be misinterpreted. But because intellect, or whatever word you want to use, nous, okay, you could use Greek terms because you don't have associations with nous in Aristotle, not a nous they put around your neck, nous and nous, and that's
nous refers to intellect.
Yeah, intellect is how nous is translated usually. Nous is the Greek word of Yevunish, okay. I don't know if it isn't okay. Nous, and that survives death, or never was it somehow wasn't the body, which you have to figure out, but it wasn't really part of this world to begin with, and therefore that's what Olam Haba is and so on, and therefore that's what a bittul nefesh seicha means, because nefesh doesn't mean care. In order to get there, you have to care for your body and the lower parts of your soul, so to speak, and so on. But really, what you have to care about, and that's the emes again. That's the emes. Emes means things that are really exist, right? Everything else doesn't really exist. If there's a part of you that really is true in any sense, it has to be that. Because things that die are not true. The Rambam says this. I'm not the one that made this up. And And there, so that's what I think Kapitel Nafsaycha means, and that's why I think it's very one of the key terms in this whole thing. Okay, Adkan enough.
When you're saying intellect, I'm a computer also has intellect.
Right? No, Chas v'shalom. I mean, that's not.
Meaning,
okay, so we have to exactly. So a better word would be, again, and I try to, when I talk about these things, the only way, and Metzshem will understand it better at some point, but the only way to even get at what these people are trying to talk about is to try to figure out things in a very basic babyish sense, right?
Even stuff.
So I'm not talking about computers. Let's talk about what we're trying to figure out. Even when you talk about intellect, trying to talk about something very weird. Again, making things weird is what philosophers do. Wonder, Aristotle calls it, right? You have to make things weird. Things that we take for granted that don't make sense. Okay, it doesn't make sense that somehow me. And me is a very bad term, by the way, but somehow there's something in me that maybe might be better, or something that's somehow connected with me, but forget about the me for a second. There's something that gets something else. I'm saying very abstract words. In other words, what we call knowledge in general means, and you could talk about human knowledge, but you could abstract it in a second to realize that not necessarily human. You could talk about computers in a second, but we sort of know what it means, or get what it means for for me to push something, right? That's the level of motion, right? If I push this, it gets pushed. Okay, that makes sense. And also, if you ask physicists, they'll start explaining you, but it seems to make sense, or sort of I understand how it works. When you push, it gets pushed. There's a cause and effect, and so on. Something that doesn't make sense, even perception, by the way, is weird. It needs explanation the same way. Okay. Right? Now explain perception. The perception in the broadest sense, right? Senses, right? I could see you. That's weird. Okay? Are you pushing me? And when I'm seeing you, there's some kind of small pushing. Pushing is the basic. Let's say pushing somehow makes sense. Cause and effect.
You flip the ear, right?
No. Wait. Don't give me ideas that Greeks had. Do it right here. Do it right here. Okay? How does this work? Okay, now I can start thinking of theories like he says. Maybe somehow you're pushing me, like your image or something is somehow bumping into me, and then I get something that somehow see you. What is seeing? What is something seeing something else? It's a very weird thing to grasp. Even just seeing, okay? Seeing is weird. It doesn't make sense. It needs to be made sense of. You get my question even? What does it mean that I see you? I see a table, and you were just an example. I see anything. What does it mean? How does it work? How does it work is not a correct word question.
What does it mean?
It's a similar question, but it's not the same exact question.
How
but if you, how does it work? By the way, how does it work?
Scientifically?
No, but the science is not going to. No, but how does the seeing work? Not again. The science is going to actually answer you. By the way, if you realize with this science, what modern science is going to answer, this photons and stuff like that, they're basically going to answer you what I just told you. You have to realize this. I told you that moving makes sense. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, I push a cup, it gets pushed. Okay, now seeing is basically that, just on photons and stuff.
Okay, but how that results in intellect?
Wait, Itans.
I'm not hearing.
According to modern science that you know or think of, seeing is basically pushing.
I think I had a very similar idea.
Wait. Seeing is basically pushing. What is seeing? Almost. You think you know what seeing is, right? Seeing is a simple sense, or sensing.
About the mechanics of
sensing.
The mechanics of a camera?
What is it? But the camera doesn't see. Let's be very clear. The camera doesn't see, right? So the camera is definitely just moves.
So the camera
right?
sees, but
no, it doesn't
see.
Cameras don't, exactly, perception. That's what I said, perception. Seeing is a kind of, cameras don't see anything, right? Because they don't have, whatever seeing is, they don't do that. They just move. A camera is not different than me pushing this. It's just a sophisticated way of pushing that ends up in a picture that I can identify as a picture. But that's not interesting.
About consciousness.
About consciousness. You see, you have all these words that make you stop thinking instead of thinking.
Like Tesla. Tesla has a robotic car that can drive itself.
No. What it doesn't. Whatever. You have to be very basic, and you already know so many things. Let's go live in a Psamidbar in Yovan, okay? And let's think very basically. Now, this gets you to the real questions, and you could. Not getting to answer that. Not true. He knows how to answer. Maybe trying to get at a question, like it's something that you should wonder about. And by the way, whatever it's justified to wonder about this. you should wonder about what does it mean to see, and I'm trying to something. Just this is like a kind of that's why it's almost meditation to figure it out. What I mean to say is, right? Whatever Tesla does, let's be very clear. Whatever he does, it's not what I call seeing. Maybe something very similar. Maybe really it is, but I just don't realize, and so on. But whatever we simply call seeing, okay, before we heard of Tesla, and even after, that's not what it is. That's not what it does, right?
Calling a camera seeing is like calling a submarine.
No, wait.
Hold on, I want to... Let me see, I understood what you said, but let me explain to you how I understood it. For example, let's just say there would be a robot that has all our senses. There's something different between us and that robot.
No, okay, nine.
Is that your question?
That could be his wanted tshuva, but I don't. I want to
identify a problem with the working.
No, but I don't want. Right. That's already too much gag. It's not basic. That's not the basic question. Because who told you about robots? What are robots even? Like let's not. Yeah, right. These are concepts. By the way, the concept of a robot, like you said, was invented long before anyone made a robot. And it's a concept. You have to realize. You know, maybe a girl. Yeah. Actually, they were automatons.
That's why they has weird subjectivity.
Yeah. Wait. One second. They dance. We're trying to stay very simple.
You know that there's a story in Google now where.
Ja, ich weiß. But ich bin specific. Weg ist der Maschine. Okay, jetzt. The point is something else. The point is that you're already using a lot. This is what really very high level concepts, right? You have a concept of a robot. There's such a thing as a robot. I don't know what that thing is. Okay, I have no idea. I don't know what a person is. How should I know what? You think that a robot is simple. It's much simpler than a person probably, but I don't know what it is. You ask me, is a person like a robot? Was this a robot? Give me the concept of the robot. Ich weiß, was a robot is. Man kann es kaufen in Geschäft and it's supposed to vacuum my floor. It obviously doesn't, because you can see that it doesn't work, okay? But that's a robot, okay? But what is a robot? What does he mean by that? So I sort of let's start things with a mean that we know. Okay, it seems to me that I should know what seeing is or perceiving is, right? Because I do it all day. And I wouldn't be able to work to be without that, right? So I don't know what a robot is. Robot is a very imagine that, and imagine in a good way, not in a like this stupid old-fashioned guy. Imagine in a basic way, right? And trying to get to the basics of how we're grasping the world. Not trying to say that these old people were smarter or were smarter. That's a stupid question. I'm trying to get at the basics, right? I'm a guy that lives in Hura dort in the prehistory, okay? Before he doesn't know how to read and write even. But he's smart. And there's something called seeing or something called perceiving. And that's something that he thinks needs an explanation. I know that this is true because we actually have these people. I mean, some of them wrote down their questions and they seem to ask this question. And they seem to be bothered by it.
Well, archaeologically,
philosophy, okay? Philosophers. There's something weird with, again, this. I could ask something like this: what kind of relationship is perceiving, right? Don't tell me that when you say, okay, it's a kind of relationship, right? This thing. Well, you can talk about an animal, right? Then you lose the problem with me, right? Animals. Talk about a cow, okay? A cow does something weird, which is not simply just being pushed, right? For example, let's say being pushed, we understand. I'm not sure that we understand that, but let's assume that we're talking about the level of life. So we're assuming, let's assume that we understand that, okay? Racks, I understand 100%. Doesn't do anything, right? They're just there. Well, okay, I don't know if I understand that. And if you kick it, it moves. Okay, sure. Steine verstehst du? But there's a bigger problem with animals, okay? By the way, you have to think about animals, not only about people.
I'm saying the question if animals perceive and what...
Animals perceive, obviously.
How do you know? Maybe they're robots.
No, I know. So again, you have a concept called robot. I don't know what this concept means. You're using a concept, right? Maybe the animal is a robot. What does it mean? What is a robot? Explain me what this robot thing is.
A robot is there to do a specific function or not, and it has certain capabilities, and it uses its perception to go about.
So now we have even more, a whole list. I have a list of words that I don't know what any of them mean. Function, perception, task, a whole bunch of words that I never heard in my life, and I don't know what they are. Can you tell me more simply what they are? No, you realize that you're using very high level concepts. No, like my son wouldn't understand what you said. Maybe now, but last year he wouldn't understand. Like you realize that these are very high level concepts that they already assume a whole metaphysics. And that's why, let's go back to much simpler people. Ich weiß, was in mind. And as far as I can tell, it looks, I'll tell you why I think my cow, Bessie the cow, she looks like she sees. You know why I know that? How I know? I'll tell you how I know. Why it makes me think that she's not a rock, right?
Because if I go in front of her, she'll avoid me.
Sure, exactly. And then without touching her, amazingly, right? When the sense of sense may be easier to understand, because you can imagine maybe just a pushing, right? It's not really. If you think about it, really that it's not. But we can imagine it's easy. Yeah, touch. Aristotle has this whole thing. We can imagine that touch is just pushing. It's not, because it's not just being pushed, right? It's also like there's something besides being pushed when you're touched, right?
There's a sense.
Being pushed into like a rock, exactly. You also somehow know, we could assume the word knowledge, but that you're being pushed, that you're being touched, right? There's something besides for just being pushed, right? What happens, the mechanism is push it. That's why it's not a problem about mechanism, just to be clear.
The result of
so sort of
very complicated,
right? It's not a question about mechanism, right? I know how touch works. Nobody ever had a real mystery about how touch works. I mean, externally, right? In what happens inside you, but that's touch, okay?
Right. The question is what.
But the problem is that touch is not just being touched. It's not just two things moving, right? When this table touches the other table, it's not having any sense, right? This table doesn't know that someone touched. Okay. As far as again, with concepts, I know, but maybe no. Realize that you're using a very crazy. I'm not even saying that's a very high level concept. What you're saying? Maybe a table is also knows, but I can explain you what are the things that make me think that a table doesn't have perception in the way that I do.
It doesn't tell me otherwise.
Exactly, sure. It's just the F-shit. But basic, very basic things. It's not only about F-shit. Maybe, now you have a whole theory. Now you're making a wild metaphysical speculation. It's and there's nice, there are people that say, magnets seem to know something, they move. Okay, that's a mystery. You understand? Other than magnets.
By the way, I just read a book about trees.
Yeah.
And according to this book, the trees have a certain knowing and they communicate.
Okay.
For all I know,
so again. But I'm not really into It's depends on. But I'm not even again. But what I'm trying to show here is that you're thinking way too quickly, for me, and way too quickly to get at what. Quickly, I don't mean quickly. Using too many assumptions. To get at what these people are even getting at, like have a basic sense. Like what I'm trying to. Mongolan. I'm already rambling around, but the goal is very simple. People like the Rambam say things. The Rambam says it made sense to him that there's something called intellect or knowledge or whatever you want to call it, and that it's a very special thing. It's like God and so on. Okay, this made sense to him. Okay, to most people nowadays it doesn't make any sense. Nicht so kashes. Weiß was will. Nicht. Ich kann es fragen. Ich kann das so gefragt. I'm not even here to prove that he's right. I don't even know that he was right. If I have a goal in this kind of thing, this is where I'm getting to philosophy. If I have a goal, it's that you should sort of understand why it basically makes sense what he's saying. In other words, understand what his problem, what he's trying to solve, what is his thing. If someone tells you, Lakewood is too hot in the summer, you know what he's saying. Maybe he's drying a cup because Florida is hotter. But you understand what he's talking about, right? You know what hotter is. You know why he would think that it's hotter than Montreal or whatever, wherever it's cooler. You understand what he's saying, right? When the Rambam says. Neshama, was going to the heaven of intellect or whatever. Nobody knows what he's saying, right? It just doesn't make any sense. You start asking questions about robot, but the question is the robot. There's 24 steps after that. What is this guy talking about? What is this knowledge that needs explanation? Why should the computer seem to work? Maybe I'm just a computer. And so on. Doesn't seem to be a problem here, right? Now you start saying maybe consciousness, whatever that means. You're already using a whole huge. And like you're on the Twin Towers already of thinking, and of course it doesn't make any sense. But you need to really get down to the basement, and really it really helps because it's true. By the way, technology really is based on having concepts. It's true. There's someone, like I said, people had concepts of robots, not entirely because automatons were real things. Like they were, but they were not so advanced. But yeah. Okay, no. Yeah. Wait. Right, but what I'm saying, because you're always add a lot of information that's confusing us. No, but the point is, all these concepts, people had a concept of a computer before they made a computer, right? You know that, right? So, but that concept is actually philosophy, right? And now we have to think what that concept is doing. But we have to go back to like 200 years ago when people started thinking of what computers might be, right? Remember the people, whatever the name was. With
that computational theories, like ideas that of computation.
Yeah. A computer was, very interestingly. Okay, but just not interested in just saying things. Point is, these things are concepts, and you start saying things. Okay, so you have a theory. Basically, you have a theory. You have a teretz from my kasha, but I want you to understand the kasha first, and understand why the other teretz is a more or less reasonable teretz. You could say now that we have robots, it seems not less mistav. Okay, but first let's get there. We're not up to there even, right? All I'm trying to show is that perception, and especially intellectual and perception, which is different from physical perception in a very real way. At least I could show you, I think, in basic to understand that there's something even more weird about that. Okay? Then it makes sense to say that it's the soul that does it. You have another theory? Kanza. You could, but by the way, your theory is as weird as the soul theory. It's not less weird. But the reason it seems less weird is just because we're very used to using those high-level concepts and not used to using the higher-level concepts that are based in the other direction. But that's why, I'm saying something very interesting now, that's why if you go down to the question, then everything starts making sense. Okay, so Plato makes sense, Aristotle makes sense, this guy makes sense. Now, who is right? Okay, that's a whole other discussion. I'm not even talking about that. I'm not up to that level to know who's right.
I'm a stickle lost now.
Exactly. So this do a pram. In other words, there's something that needs explaining in the basic sense, not explaining in the sense of having a formula that answers questions. Explaining in the sense of making sense to me. I'm a guy, and some things make sense to me, some things don't make sense to me, okay? The less things make sense to me, I'm the bigger philosopher I am. Something makes sense to me. Like I said, let's assume, and I don't think that's simple. I don't think that pushing is simple, but I'm trying to solve something. There's something more weird, that these are progressive levels of weirdness, of less sense that they make. Okay, there's something more weird about perception, about animals, than there's about rocks, okay? Rocks seem to be simple. At some level, rocks are on ich verstehe rocks. Okay, you were yesterday the guy earth level. Ich verstehe rocks. Okay, you did the 4 levels. You understand? No, you start really. This actually it's connected. Rocks seem to make sense. Okay. Now, by the way, does it make sense? Why do they always fall down? That's a mystery also. Like, gravity, but the gravity isn't. But not great. Doesn't matter. It's okay, but at least it seems to be. I don't want to say any words. It seems to make sense. It needs some kind of explanation, but nicht gefährlich. A rock mit mich verstehen sich ganz gut. Okay.
Rich thought it was just heavy, right?
Okay, 1 second. No, 1 second. I'm just saying rocks. Okay. Point is rock. Besides from magnets that are weird rocks, magnets are a mystery. Magnets I don't understand. Okay, Thales said magnets must have a soul because something's going on, but.
Who said this?
Thales, first Greek philosopher. Magnets are weird because magnets are these things that just move by themselves, and they're rocks. Something is very weird about a magnet, right? Okay, you could listen to the Richard Feynman trying to explain if he knows how a magnet works.
Who?
Richard Feynman has a YouTube clip, which is like how magnets work, and he tries to show you that he doesn't know the answer.
It's just as weird as gravity.
Okay, wait, gravity is again just a concept, and it makes you think that you know something, right? And it's very amazing how these concepts are harmful.
I hated gravity.
No, not only gravity is just a word; doesn't mean anything. Gravity is just what we.
No, it's admitting that it doesn't make sense.
No, let me say it very simply. This is very harmful to thought. That's in the sense that in which science, and not science, the way it gets taught often is very harmful to thought, because you have all these words that you pretend to answer something and they don't say anything. They just restate the question again, and then why do things fall? Gravity. Well, right, what is gravity? It's what makes things fall. Thank you very much. Now I understand. Right?
No, we don't know.
Exactly. So in other words,
you inserted the conclusion.
So let's use the example. 1 second.
We don't know what the rock is either.
1 second, exactly. But this is what I'm saying. So 1 second. I'm in it.
1 second. When you said you know what a rock is,
no, I don't. Exactly. But I said it's more simple. It's more simple.
So
I didn't say.
So why is the magnet any different? Just
No. Because I have a different problem with it. That's what I'm trying to get at. But I've used. By the way, let's talk about the rocks, because rocks seem to be simpler. So I'm going to use this motion of gravity just so I understand. Same point that I was saying, right? Then here you're masking, right? People nowadays think they know why rocks fall. They're taught in school because of gravity, and they literally lied to you. They said rocks fall because of gravity. This because you could delete it. Rocks fall, gravity. That's because I'm doing nothing there. Because it's not because gravity is not a cause.
You put the conclusion in the premise.
Yeah, and you go now. Let's say I go around. Let's say I tell you.
It's an assumption.
Not even an assumption. Gravity is just a description. It's with shorthand for everything falls. All right, thank you very much. I mean, there's quantum gravity and stuff that might. But it doesn't do anything, right? And now let's say I'm just trying to understand. Let's say I come and tell you that some guy in sometimes said that things fall because. By the way, they say this. I'm just showing you how crazy we are, how brainwashed. And people say that Aristotle said, he didn't say that, but people say that Aristotle said that rocks fall because they like to be on the bottom.
Right.
Okay, he doesn't say that. But people say that. Okay? and everyone says that guy is crazy. We know why, because gravity. But that guy was not. Like, so they want to. Hello, your theory makes. He even has. By the way, his theory is even better than yours. Even in the.
According to Aristotle, the rock has consciousness because he wants something.
I don't know what consciousness is. You're saying a very high level concept. I don't know what consciousness is. Still don't know. And the people that say, okay, I don't even know what the problem is. I mean, I know what the problem is, but it's not so simple. But he knows this delusion.
Sentient.
Wait. But wait. So again, you're using words that you have to define before you use. Racks we all saw. My child knows what a rack is. Okay. He doesn't know what consciousness is yet. So, you understand? Let's be 7 years old and let's live in ancient Israel or wherever you want to live. No, when I say this, it's not because I have anything, just because that's what basic thought is, right? Everything else starts from that, right? Now, if you say the guy that says rocks fall because they must love the center of the earth or something, that guy is not. But we just say they fall because gravity, we're genius, right?
It's the same answer.
Nishton is the same answer. That guy actually has a better answer.
Right.
Because he has at least giving a cause. It could be it's nonsense. There's a problem. But at least I understand him very well. The guy is making sense. So now, of course, he's assuming something very weird. It's not clear that he made more sense than less. Because it's just assuming that one weird thing and now answered it with something that's 10 times as weird. That might not be a very good teretz. Okay, that's a problem. But
to me, they equally don't answer the question.
Exactly, they might.
Yeah, but
one tried to answer the question. The other one just didn't try. But this is, by the way, true. There's
one is going into the mind of the rock.
I'm saying that again. Let's assume this stupid theory. It's like a stupid theory because what does it mean as a mensch the rock? By the way, I'm just saying the point is that when you get the question, which is very hard for most people in gravity, then you realize that there's a question. And now there's a lot of answers. Maybe we don't know the answer. Maybe we don't know. Maybe it's a waste of time to speculate. And maybe not.
Exactly what Newton did, right? When
yes.
He were hoping to find a way to overthrow the scholastic understanding.
100%. It's true. They gave up on understanding, and then they pretend that the question doesn't make sense. But that part is dumb. You don't understand. They decide just to describe it in a more precise way. Okay, that's great. That's a good thing. But the thing that the question doesn't make sense. Now. And it's true, rocks don't make sense either, but living things make even less sense, okay? Because as normal and as little sense as rocks being moved and falling makes, cows, bugs even, right? Aristotle talks a lot about insects for some reason, and on this all.
He was a biologist.
Yeah, but he thinking what's the most, worms.
Basic, right?
In some sense. Worms are even weirder than rocks, okay? Worms, they don't have eyes. I don't even know if they have eyes. But they seem to know where they're going, right? For some value of no, right? I'm using no as a very, he eats food and he knows to find this food and he puts it away and this is something that needs an explanation, something very weird. Okay? Now, it's hard to figure out if worms actually have perception, but they seem to have perception, at least in the sense that they, like I said, they aren't just being pushed. And also they sort of, like you're saying, if you put them, well, I don't know if worms avoid danger so well, but they try.
They wouldn't survive if they didn't.
Exactly, so they try. But they try. Exactly. And then if you hire bigger animals, you see very clearly, he's the guy, he makes sense. He's making sense. In other words, let's say something else. He's making sense of the world by himself, right? The cow, not only that, he remembers who you are and he comes every day to ask you for food, right? So he even has memory in some sense, right? But not even getting to that. But even we can talk about perception. He knows that there's food over there, and he goes there to get it. Right? Rocks now don't do that. Whatever explains rocks doesn't have this level of complexity or this level of whatever it is. Right? Because rocks don't ever know that they have to be there. Well, maybe they actually do, but don't seem to at least. They seem to be just being pushed around.
Everything gets what it needs. A rock doesn't need anything, so it doesn't get.
Okay, so I get it. There's happy. But the point is that nothing to explain there. There's nothing. There's no problem. I'm not saying anything. Maybe it's good to be a rock. That's already a whole other question. But I'm just showing you that it's something weird. Where did I get to this? There's something weird about even perception, okay? Now, and I'm skipping a lot of steps. We could, like I said, we could go from insects to thing and show that this, and even more. You could go up the evolutionary tree and see how things get more and more weird. And evolution doesn't explain anything, right? Evolution just says how it works. Doesn't tell you what's going on. Now, humans, and maybe some animals also, I'm not even interested in discussing if animals or maybe robots, I don't care. Monkeys, some other things seem to have the ability not only to sense or to perceive. They do something even more weird than that. Okay, how do I see that they do something more weird than that? I'm going to say a simple way. And this is where it becomes complicated, because some people might tell you that it's not true, that humans just basically know where their food is and get it, just like cows. But that's why we always talk about math. Okay.
But worms also respond to more.
Okay, that's why. Let's talk about math. That's why we usually talk about math. It might not be a good example, really, but we usually talk about math. Math, most people agree, is a real science. Now, math seems. Math seems to be, no, Aristotle also didn't think it was real science, but math seems to be to most people, and again, obviously, you can do math. Now, what does it mean to do math? By the way, another weird thing that they teach you in school, and everyone thinks that math makes sense, some people at least, the ones that like, and there's like people that like math, people that don't like math, it's a whole weird thing. And what is math? It's this crazy, weirdest thing, okay? Math is something like this, that 2 apples are the same thing as 2 pears. They're both 2. There's 1, 2 for both apples and pears. That's the nuttiest thing I've ever heard.
But they share the two-ness.
Yeah, it makes no sense. Well, you're saying, you again answer the answer. I'm telling you, not there. These are 2 different things. Now, there's some fact about apples that is the same exact about, well, pears and apples are very similar, but also about planets and about loose leaves and about people and about.
And as a common denominator across the board.
Yeah, and not only common, it's not a denominator. It's not really a denominator at all, right? Because I could actually, this is where it gets even more weird, right? Now, one thing, right? I could do these words problems. You go to school, like Sally had 2 apples, and then her brother Mary ate 1, whatever. And how many apples does she have, right? And at some point, it clicks for you, and this is what learning math really is, right? Something click that the apples are totally irrelevant, right? And then you start using X's and V's, right? And whatever, and symbols. By the way, using symbols in math was a huge innovation at some point. But no, a lot later. Symbols. Seriously? Symbols? No, mathematical symbols are like even numbers. They were only words, and Collides only has words. It doesn't do symbols at all. Yeah, no. They never use X variable. All these things are very late. Point is, I'm showing you that things that are very simple to us are not simple. But
Pythagoras invented it.
No, it's a mathematical symbols. No, whatever. What am I saying? Now math, that's what I'm saying. When this second in your 3rd grade or wherever, where you figure out that this teacher is drawing you a cup and he's putting apples into his question, then you should like realize that something is very weird about the world. And not only about the world, right? About, again, like your relationship with it. Like this idea that we could know that it even is possible that such a thing could happen. Like apples, apples and all very complicated by themselves. But let's okay, and cows and so on, all these things. But now 2 cows and 2 apples and 2 stars, all of them are 2, right? And whatever operations apply to the number 2 and whatever factors and everything are true for all of them. I don't even need to, and at some point I don't even need to know what it is. And I do know this, right? It works. Not only it works, I seem to know it. I don't know what knowledge is, again, a word that's already a concept. It seems to be a thing, right? There's like a thing called math.
Be the case.
No, it seems to be a thing. There seems to be such a thing called knowing that there's such a thing as the number 2. Okay? There's such a thing. The number 2. I never saw the number 2. Exactly. But the numbers are a very simple concept. I never ever saw the number 2. I never experienced it. Well, some people might say you're abstracting from your experience, but I never like directly experienced it for sure. It wasn't pushed into me. I didn't want it. It doesn't fit into all the previous things that we already didn't understand, like racks and seeing and perception and movement and so on. It's not that. It's something besides.
Abstract concept.
Again, now you have an abstract concept called abstract concept. Now you can stop thinking about this because it's an abstract concept. What does that mean, abstract concept? Abstract concept, just like gravity, the same thing. It's a word for this weird thing that we don't understand. Right?
But that's what you're trying to
okay. yeah, you're not wrong. I'm just saying you that you're just exactly. You just gave it a label. It doesn't help me much, right? And even that label presumes certain metaphysics, but I'm just showing you that there's something very weird, and it's even doubly weird when you realize that it doesn't seem to be a need for there to exist 2 things for this fact to be true. Let's say it like this, right?
To be a concept without the reality.
It exists independently of the examples that we use.
2 seems to be 2, there's such a thing 2, and I don't even have to say 1 and 1 is 2, right? Just 2 or 1, by the way, for that the number, right? Doesn't seem to me. It doesn't seem to be any. It doesn't seem to need. They don't think about it. Doesn't seem to need.
Zero. That's weird.
Exactly. We could have negative numbers and we could have imaginary numbers and stuff like that. That's after you realize that you could just fly with it. We could have infinities and stuff. But I mean, again, you're making it so complicated. Why? I don't need imaginary numbers for the problem. The number 2 doesn't make any sense. Okay? The number 2 makes no sense. Not anything. The thing that you learn in second grade and first grade. The number 2 is a weird thing. And if you think about it, the teacher teaches you in a simple way, like there's 2 apples, but once you realize that the apples are not, the first step 1, you realize that the same thing applies to apples as to oranges, right? So the apples are irrelevant, but actually both of them are irrelevant, right? It doesn't seem to be true. You could claim that it is, but it doesn't. It's very intuitive to think that the 2s and the 3s and so on don't need apples or anything. They have nothing to do with them, actually. Now, they do have something to do with them because they work for them also, right?
Yeah,
but they have nothing to do with them.
As a first order question, when I see a cow, okay, so I see one cow. Now, I look over to my left and I see cow again. Saying,
is it the same one?
No, but now I see...
Maybe it's the same thing.
Whatever the problems are that are associated with that, they are the same. But now I see cow.
Yeah, you could ask the same question without the numbers.
But what's weird, I think that's 1 and 0 are much weirder numbers. When we think about the origin of math, right? 1 and 0 are stranger numbers than 2 and onwards, right?
Okay, so?
No, I'm just saying that's
there's levels of weirdness, and you could ask the same question about cows. I just use numbers because people get it to that usually.
But 1 is
I could ask you about 2 cows being the same cow and or not in the same question. Or similar question.
How do we get to the number 1 is even stranger place to get to.
Yeah, true. Decided, but let's. I wanted to do questions that third grade people should get. That is something problematic.
I'm still not.
I mean, and the
I'm not connected to what you're driving.
Okay, the verstehst the problem von was math macht keinen sense. Okay, jetzt now all of these things we seem to know. Now, let's stop here, right? And that is even more weird than it just existing by itself. It's doubly weird, or it's same weird, but it is another thing, right? In other words, again, when animals or some animals, could see. Okay, that relationship we still don't understand, but somehow let's imagine that there's some movement, there's some touch, right? Technically, there's some touch. Like the photon goes into his eye. Okay, sad. Photon went into his eye. Okay, it still has the problem, but it sort of thinks. Now, what went into what for the number 2 to be in your mind or something like that? Now you have to remember, we think of mind as like a faculty, like a thing. This is a very conceptualized point. Don't think, when I say mind, I don't mean anything besides with the number 2. But the number 2 being known to you, right? Being something that works for you, that exists to you, right? That's all I mean. I don't mean anything else. Not like a brain or a mind or a computer, anything. Just not these things, this concept, you could call it a concept. Any concept, basically. Which doesn't need matter, like that's when numbers are easy to think of. This number 2 or number 1, like he says, or number 0, which doesn't exist at all. Number 0, but number 2 seems to be a thing, and not only a thing, up somewhere by itself. Again, I start to lose my words, but it's a thing to me, right? A thing to me. I'm saying such weird words. This is basically how Aristotle derives all his words by doing these kind of games. It's a thing to me, okay? This thing to me is what we call knowledge, okay? That's what we call, and this is a mystery. It doesn't seem to come from anywhere or go anywhere. It doesn't seem to match any of the things we know from any of the lower things, from we just discussed.
Well, you're describing these things as truths when you say knowledge, but it's undeniably functional. So,
what do you mean functional?
Well, it's very functional information, meaning I can take that, let's say there's 1, 2, and I can use them. I use that every single day.
Yeah, right. But it seems to be.
Well, it doesn't have to be true, but it is something.
You could say that, but I don't want to get.
Latches onto it at a young age. It's like, well, this is
right, but
system that's
latch onto what at a young age, though?
Exactly. No, that's true. It's true.
How does it get there?
No, wait.
It's so simple and so functional.
No. But that could be. But again, 1 second.
Because it's easy to understand.
But I don't need to.
It's easy to use. It's easy to optimize.
Again, I don't. I can
drive a car with that.
Wait. I understand.
So right away, I'm young.
I don't think you have to know how it works. I don't think you have to know how it works. I don't think you have to know how it works. I'm just using it to show. No. So again, you could make a theory that builds on what you're saying, but that would be a theory. That would be an answer to the question. I'm just saying the question. In other words, you could. No, you understand what I'm saying? That would be an answer. You could say that there's really no such thing as knowledge. Basically, what you're saying. Because in other words,
I'm not saying there's such thing as knowledge.
you could say people say this. If it wouldn't be you, you wouldn't be the first one to say that. You know.
Defining knowledge is like a level of truth. Because you were saying, how do we know numbers? I was like, well, we don't know numbers.
Okay.
We utilize numbers.
You could say that. Well, no, but that's that. So again, as a little baby, as a child, or at least, again, you could claim that these are people misleading us. But that seems to be a theory in the sense of the primary thing, and people could argue. People do argue about this. So you know, but it seems that would seem to be another weird theory. In other words, just like when I say weird theory, and it doesn't mean not true. Weird meaning not the basic sense that I'm talking about. In other words, you tell me, it seems to me true. Like truth is again a word, a concept. It seems to be that, okay? Don't say the word true. It's that too is a thing. Like to, not a thing that is, you know. Truth seems to be, okay? To me, when I use to, and it's true, children don't probably get it this way, but at some point they do get it. I think that it's not a crazy experience to get it. You don't have to be like go to college or something. At some point there seems to be a thing, and some kids wonder about it. Like you could see kids asking such questions, like, "But where did the two come from?" or something. And it seems, in other words, you could answer him, "No, you're making a mistake. You're not really knowing anything. You're just using it. Just useful. It works to organize the word." You could say it, but that's your answer. Then you're sort of like answering it by denying the premise, like by denying the question. The basic, I think, and you could argue with this, I think that the basic, at least what all these philosophers are starting from, but I think the basic, like the basic data, the basic fact that most people seem to think that they know numbers. They don't seem to think that they're using numbers. Even nowadays, again, some people nowadays, just to be clear, people nowadays. Wait, one second. I don't never heard of this Chomsky. Ancient India. Okay, now the nowadays. By the way, just to be clear, nowadays it seems to make sense to people to say what you're saying, and that has a history too.
It doesn't make sense.
One second. To you not, it makes sense. But to me it makes sense. What's the difference? It makes sense because we're so used to interacting with the world in a totally functional way, where you don't care, like your car.
I wasn't raised in the jungle, but conceptually, like if I was.
I know, but this concept, this seems
me very long. Almost.
Again,
I would say because you were talking about computers earlier. It's like, so you're taking everything as like, intellectual idea. What is this? Is it real? Is it not? Well, there's like that survival instinct. It's just like, okay, to A accomplish this.
But you know that you just use this concept, right? Survival instinct is a concept.
Right.
It's not a basic fact, like.
Oh, right. Oh, again, that's what I'm saying. So I'm going beyond like the intellect and beyond like the concept. I'm not beyond. I'm sorry, before it.
I'm trying to go before the concepts, but it's not clear to me. What I think, and again, I think this because, and it might not be true. Like the world could have been different, but I think this because, and I have reason for thinking this. And again, it's like I think this because of the history of thought, which seems to work this way and not the other way. In other words. And you could argue with this, and it's very hard to actually know. But what time is it? I think that the more, and by the way, there were people that said this, so it's hard to know. But I think that most people would see. Again, I think that the more basic. That's what I'm saying. I think that the more basic grasping, the more basic, like before all these words and things. Is not to say that, well, we're just trying to use things or to survive or so on. I think that that's actually a theory. And I note that it's a theory that masquerades as being prior to theory, but it's the opposite. It's a very highly theorized.
As what? As
being prior to theory. It's been like an untheorized thing, but it's actually a highly theorized way of thinking. In other words, if you talk to primitive people, by the way, math is not, most primitive people do not have math. Many of them like count up to 5 or something like that. There's actually anthropology about this. These are nothing as simple as you think. But besides for that, I don't think that. I just need to get to this place. I don't really need. I don't think that. What was I saying? I don't think that thinking that. Well, numbers don't really exist is the first step. That's a theory. It's more of a theory than the other theory. It's a theory that also like denies the question, but it's a theory.
Well, I don't know if they don't exist. I didn't get there yet. I was more like saying they're.
We don't need. I understand. We don't. I know. I get it. I get what you're saying, and I think that And historically, usually this arises, and it arises in many contexts. See, theories like this, exactly the details is not relevant. Theories like this arise in many contexts and always as an answer to the question, never as the question. Just to be very clear. There's always people that say these kind of things.
Yeah,
there's always people that forever. There was the guy in whatever. There's always people. I'm not going to give names, and we get into things. There were always people. As far as we know, there were always people that made claims like this, but they all claim to say what you're saying. Like, yeah, it's the other way around. But it seems like if you read the chronology, it's always. I'm just making this up. I'm just claiming this. You could dispute it, but it seemed that they're always answering the question rather than being the question. Does that make sense? In other words, does it make sense to what I'm saying?
No, what's the point?
These, okay, I know, but everyone is lost. It's fine. That's all I'm saying. What I'm saying is that, I also think like in this context, when people start thinking computers, and you can see that has a history, but even if you go back to ancient history, anywhere.
I use the jungle experience as someone.
Right, I think that in the jungle, there were people, let's just be real. In the jungle, there were more people that believed in ghosts than were reductionist materialists, right? Okay, and ghosts are basically a theory that make sense of things and not that say that we're just functioning. You can have a theory of ghosts that they're just functional, but the people that believe in them, they don't think they're just surviving, right? They believe in them.
I wouldn't say
right?
believing in ghosts is as functional as using numbers.
Okay, that's sadly, but you
easily
no.
imagine a world where it is.
No, wait. Oh, eventually. No, numbers are more functional. No, for sure. No, it's true. What do you mean? Numbers are definitely more useful than ghosts.
So often.
But for explaining the world, they might be more useful. More functional.
But ghosts, you're saying, could be just as true as numbers, in the sense that if I believe in ghosts, and that causes...
No. All I'm saying is that...
If my belief in ghosts keeps me away from staying in the dark side of the forest where the wolves
but
will
that
come eat me,
again,
then that's true.
Yeah, but you're again being outside of the guy, right?
First of all, I can create a million systems because numbers are hard to replace. I can replace your ghost with.
Okay. Let's. I'm gonna finish, and then you'll do something you want. Wait, I'm gonna stop here. Give me 1 second to
replace numbers is something as efficient.
Okay,
yeah, I get what you're doing. But kids said, wait. Let me finish. Let me just finish here. I'm just making a historical point, claim. I don't know. I'm just saying. Anyways, this was all to answer like what is this snooze thing, anyways. But this is all the answer to your question, like what is this mind thing, anyways? Why would we need such a thing or whatever? That's all to get to that, and now you see it gets nowhere. That's all I'm trying to get to. I gave you this whole story of the universe just to get to that.
You were asking the question. It was a great question, but then you were bringing proofs, and I was like, well, some of
the I'm not bringing proofs.
Place where people
I'm not bringing proofs.
Using basic functionality.
I'm not bringing proofs. I'm just explaining the question. I don't have any proofs. This is from my perspective. Okay, I was just answering his question. Why do people even think that's a thing called mind? And this is the answer, because there's things like math, which is not the only example, which don't seem to work with any other system. And this is what we mean when we say mind. We don't mean more than that. The question of it, not the, as an answer, you can say there is this thing called soul that does it, but that's not really saying anything, just giving it a name. But that was all that I tried to say. And then he tried to say that, well, maybe we could. In other words. But another way of saying it, that we could reduce it to pushing and pulling. Okay, but that might be true. But all I said was that an answer to the question, not the question. And I think that historically it's like that. In other words, because most people actually, what was I saying about the ghost was something like most people believe in souls in the jungle, by the way, or some version of it. I think so. Yeah. Again, I don't know. A lot of research that I've seen says that. But I don't. Maybe they're just making things up or confused. But at least all. At least.
Indians?
Yeah. Also, but honestly, those Indians are stam. All cultures that we know of. Well, not all of them.
Well,
I don't know. That's a question. Anyways, that's the question. No, I didn't mean ghosts. Not the point.
That goes beyond numbers, I would say.
Yeah, of course. Numbers are the philosophy's theory. Right. Okay. Anyways. Yeah. Okay. And a God and so on. Okay. Anyways. Yeah. It's ready. We got to ready this. That's the point. That's the point. So there's something very weird with knowing things, and it's a very weird relationship. You could explain it away. You could do a lot of things, but it's at least weird. And this is why. This is where things start. This is where there's different directions to go with this, but. that's I think that you should like wonder for like a few hours, like what does it mean to know what is going on, and you could do what he said and say, well, maybe it's just, but that's also a theory, like it's a whole theory and it has implications and so on. It's not like just
in order for me
it doesn't make you not being able to wonder about it. Okay.
I come up with
Yeah.
something.
What am I doing?
My belief in ghosts is functional.
Yeah.
Is that true?